Great. All right. I've drawn 3 names out of the box, and if you are Jonathan Rose, Diane Eagle, or Marcus Gallegos, please come forward and ask your questions.
And can you raise your hand if you have the microphone? We got a microphone there.
We have 2 microphones,
here.
one on either side, so whichever is more convenient for you. That's, you know, please, let's try to stick to people who have signed up to ask questions. Thanks. Please, go ahead. What's your name, sir?
My name is Marcus Gallegos. So I hear your rhetoric about North Korea, and I understand that you are a big role in setting the policy about that. But in 2003, Libya disarmed to end the sanctions from the US. And in 2011, Gaddafi was sodomized by rebels backed by the US. So North Korea, naturally, let's not be naive, they're not gonna peacefully disarm because they saw what happened and they're not stupid. So I don't understand how you plan to peacefully disarm North Korea other than sanctions. But as you said earlier today, China controls 90% of their, or fuels 90% of their economy. So if we just keep putting sanctions and China goes along with it, you know, they're left with nothing left. So we're gonna force them in a corner and they'll be left with nothing less to lose.
Thank you.
It's a great question. And thank you for that. Kim Jong-un is under the mistaken belief that his regime will only survive if he possesses nuclear weapons. I believe that Kim Jong-un's regime will only survive if he peacefully denuclearizes in North Korea. And that ought to be because we cannot, the consequences of an armed conflict in Korea would be horrific. And we've got to fight and strive for that peaceful denuclearization. North Korea isn't even the most sanctioned nation on the planet right now by the United States. There are other nations that have more sanctions than North Korea. Well, I'm talking about sanctions. Yeah. So what we have to do is we have to put pressure on the North Korean regime and those who enable it. How we do it? We do it through a series of sanctions. We do it through a series of naming entities. There are over 5,000 businesses in China. This is a report that you can look up. A report put out by a group called C4ADS. C4ADS. Over 5,000 Chinese entities that are doing business in North Korea today, some of whom are even reported to have offices in the United States. We need to bar and deny dollar-denominated transactions with these businesses when they try to gain access to our financial system. We need to put pressure on the Chinese. We have to make sure that we can put that increasing pressure on anyone who enables the North Korean regime. The other thing that we have to do, North Korea is sending out basically slave labor around the globe. If you look at what they are doing, they have laborers building soccer stadiums in Russia. They have laborers working in Africa in restaurants, and they send the wages don't go to the employees from North Korea. The wages go back to enable the regime. It is a violation of basic human rights what they are doing, and we have to stand up for human rights. And so we've got to stop this. So that's one thing that we've got to do. The other thing that we have to do with North Korea is we have to make sure that we confirm our alliance with South Korea and Japan to put pressure on China to do more when it comes to Kim Jong-un. I believe the State Department should stop dragging their feet, and they should label Kim Jong-un as a state sponsor of terror today. They should do that today. We've got to do more to make sure that we do this.
All right, let's move on to the next question.
My name is Diane Eagle, and I appreciate your comments on the violence in Charlottesville, but I want to know if you will demand that Bannon, Gorka,
Let's let her go ahead and finish.
Miller, and all the other alt-right members in the administration be fired, because if you don't demand that, your words are meaningless.
I said this morning, I'm not going to demand that the president fire somebody. That's his decision. But I will stand up against white supremacy, and I will stand up against the KKK. I will stand up against racism, and I have done it, and I will continue to.
You know what? Again, if you're interested in hearing the senator, he's trying to answer the questions. Let's please keep down. He's trying to answer the lady's question. So go ahead. Yeah, all right.
That's not enough because the neo-Nazis and white supremacists all saw the nod and a wink that Trump gave them, waiting 2 days to say anything. And as long as they are represented and justified in the White House, they will continue with their acts of violence. You have to stand up against Trump and tell him to get them out unless they're Republicans.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. All right. Great.
Anyone who believes in KKK ideology, neo-Nazis, should go back to the cave they came from.
Thank you. All right. Is Jonathan Rose here? Over here, Jonathan, go ahead. Your question, please.
Hi, Senator. Thanks for giving us an in-person town hall. I guess you can't hear me.
Hold it to the mic.
Yeah,
hold the mic
yeah.
Okay, all right. Can you hear me? Okay, thank you for seeing us in person. I'm glad that you get to see the real response to your answers as opposed to the telephone town hall. I'm sorry to do this to you, but I had a very similar question to her, we could turn it into a statement. So Gorka has made anti-Semitic comments. Miller basically got his start writing by talking about Latinos in a negative way. Steve Bannon created a place that he called the home for alt-right, and I'm sorry that I'm boring you. But so I couldn't really hear your answer to her, but I'm just wondering how you can do what you did so well at the beginning of this press conference, which is denounce the alt-right, the people who did this violence, yet still support a president who would put people like that in positions of power within his administration.
All right.
Again, the president should have immediately denounced the racism, the bigotry, the hatred that he saw in Charlottesville. The president should have done that immediately. And what he did today again, goes back on what he said yesterday, and that's unacceptable. The president was wrong to do that. And I've said that loud and clear. And so the president has control over his staff. But what I'm saying is this: there is no room for racism, hatred, or KKK.
Come on. So while we're going on, would Joe Biebert come forward? Judy, I'm sorry, I can't, Ala Prandine, and Emma Votter. Next three questions. Please.
Senator Gardner, thank you for being here today. I have a question regarding Medicare, Medicaid. There were several of my friends that sat outside your office. Some of them sat inside your office. They were carried away by the police. In 1978, they did a protest in front of the Capitol, and they were brought out coffee and donuts. So there's quite a change in that behavior. Many of the people here may not realize that Medicaid is the only program that supports home health care. Medicare does not provide that. And I don't know if there's any insurance companies that will provide home health care. Everything is focused toward nursing homes. If I were to be in a nursing home right now, it would cost a minimum of about $6,000 per month. Right now, I can have all my care taken care of for about $3,000 a month. Plus, I can go out and work. I have my freedom. I can go out, be a part of the community. I live in the community. If Medicare gets cut, there's no way that Colorado can make up the difference because of Tabor. So I'm asking you, please protect our Medicaid.
And look, I think what I'm very worried about, and what I've said months and months ago, is that we have to make sure that Medicaid is sustainable. And I sent a letter to leadership talking about how we have a sustainable Medicaid program, because right now if you look at the Denver Post editorial over, I think it was over the weekend, there was a story about how it is now the largest portion of Colorado's budget. It's about 22.5% between the federal and state spending side, and it's gobbling up more and more resources. And what's happened is, with the $20 trillion in debt, how are we going to make sure that the most vulnerable people, the people most in need, continue to have the care? Because that's what I'm committed to do, is to make sure that the people who are most in need
let him answer.
have the care that we know we can do as a great nation. And so that's what I'm going to continue to do, is to make sure that we don't end up in a situation where we've created so much spending that it puts pressure on the people who truly need the most help. I've supported ideas that would give the states a way to create a system that would work for them, that would create a Medicaid solution for states, because what Colorado has is different than what Alabama has, different than what New York has, and I believe we can do a good job defining for Colorado what the Medicaid needs in Colorado are. That's what we ought to do. Now I heard the response on single payer. Raise your hand if you support single payer. How many people in here support single payer? All right. Single payer was on the ballot last year in Colorado, and it was defeated 80% to 20% in Colorado.
Yeah. All right, next question, please. We have another question over here.
So you'll hold it. Okay. Really quick, this is a scary question for me to ask, so I would appreciate no interruptions on this one, as it's very personal. But I'm a rape survivor, and I was recently diagnosed with PTSD. I'm a beneficiary of the ACA as well. That's not my question. You're the father of daughters, and I'm sure you're a wonderful father who loves them very much and wants them to be in a world where things like that don't happen. I'm wondering how you explain to them your support of a president who's openly boasted about sexual assault.
Thank you for that question. It took a lot of courage to do it, and thank you for bringing that forward. And I hope that everybody in here will look at what I said in relation to the Access Hollywood tapes. I hope that you'll see that statement that I made then.
I did see your comments at that time, and I really do appreciate them. I'm just confused about how the transition went to supporting him continually.
Well, look, I support... I take it not many people in here watch Fox News, because they, is that right? Not many people watch Fox News? Because on Fox News, they get mad at me for not supporting the president enough. But I have voted against the trade representative selection by the president. I stood up when he issued the travel ban. I stood up when he said the wall that he was going to do, because I think that's a misdirection that we should not go forward with. We should do something different. And so those are the kinds of things that I will continue to stand up where the president is wrong, just like I did over the weekend, like I've done today. And I'm going to continue to stand up where I think there are things that we should and can work with. Look, there are things in this country where people are going to disagree. We are all going to have disagreements. We are going to agree and disagree on things. I disagree with a single-payer system. I disagree with a single-payer system. But what we ought to do is recognize that people of disparate political views can disagree but still work together. Because if we shout each other down, we will never have the kind of bipartisan success that we need in this country.
Now wait, I want to stop here just a second. The foul language, you know, really, is that how we do it here? The shouting over the top of other people. If you're actually interested in his response, or if you just wanted to come here and jeer, let's try to keep it civil and so we can get through as many questions as possible. So with that, we have the next question. Who is the next question, ma'am?
Hi, I'm Judy Alaprandini, and my question is about ethics.
I'm sorry, about what?
Ethics. This is the most unethical. This is the most unethical presidential office. I'm not doing this well, sorry.
Yeah, you're doing great. I agree. Keep going.
Okay. In fact, Walter Schaub just resigned because he couldn't get anywhere. The head of the Office of Government Ethics, because he couldn't get anywhere. I'm really concerned Trump hasn't released his taxes.
Great.
He hasn't released his taxes. He shut down the logs of people coming to visit the White House. These little things just seem to be becoming the norm, and I'm really concerned that this is becoming the norm. And when we met with your office staff, the answer was basically something you said earlier, which is that's the president's prerogative. It may be the president's prerogative, but I would really like to hear you stand up like you did this week and say that it's wrong.
I'm going to continue to support the investigation into Russia. We have to make sure that we hold everyone accountable and transparent as expeditiously as possible and in a bipartisan fashion on Russia. That's why I support Robert Mueller's efforts. That's why I support the efforts to make sure that the Senate Intelligence Committee is working on this effort together. Mark Warner and Richard Burr have done a good job of proceeding with this investigation. That's why I continue to support that. And when it comes to taxes, I think all candidates should have to release their taxes. And why don't we do that?
Great. Would Aaron Rosenthal, Ruth Stevens, and Darius Cozart? While we're waiting, one card in here said, I have a prayer to give the senator. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for that, too.
Do we have a question over here?
Okay, thank you. Well, what a wonderful crowd. And I wish I could get this microphone to all you guys, because I know you guys all have questions out there, very important ones. My question is this. Eisenhower warned about the military-industrial complex. We just raised our military budget by almost $60 billion. And we're being told that we do not have the resources for social programs. Never in the history of the Pentagon have they ever undergone an audit. Never. With almost $700 billion, do you, yes or no, support the audit of the Pentagon so we as taxpayers understand how our tax dollars are being spent, especially in all of the conflict and pain and suffering we're causing around the world?
I think audits could be a very powerful tool. Absolutely. We should audit a lot of government agencies to figure out where they're spending money properly, improperly. The Pentagon, audit them, make sure they're spending it right. There's nothing wrong with an audit. Why not? Why not? Why not? Absolutely.
Yeah, great.
So look.
I encourage you to write a bipartisan bill with one of your colleagues in the Senate to audit the United States Pentagon so we know how we're spending our tax dollars.
Oops, that's the wrong chart.
You need a different one?
Yeah, and one thing, you made a comment on the growth of defense spending, and I just want to point something out, too, that this is our discretionary and mandatory spending over the past several years, since 2008 going to 2027. This blue line, I know it's hard to see it if you have, sorry about that, but this line that's right here, this blue line includes national defense, national parks, national institutes of health, and national labs. And you can see how very little growth they have seen since 2008. And so these are important issues that we address because things like, the source is the Congressional Budget Office. Thanks for asking. This is CBO. And so if you have this line right here, this indicates mandatory spending, and you can see the increase in spending for Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and interest payments. And what happens in this country with $20 trillion in debt, we're crowding out important areas of spending because this line also includes education. It doesn't just include defense. And so what we've got to make sure that we do is a couple of things. Number one, we grow the economy. Number two, we pass a balanced budget amendment.
Come on, please.
Yeah.
You know, please, can we just keep it down for a second?
Yeah. So, what I'm talking about is this. All right, well, if you don't want to hear the answer to that, we can go to the next question.
All right, let's go over here to the next question.
Gardner. My name is Ruth Tafoya Stevens, and my question has to do with the Affordable Care Act. Because you have voted 3 times to repeal and replace or just repeal. What I want to know is if you are successful, you being Republicans, are successful in repealing this, what happens to the money that you're going to take away from all the poor people that are on Medicare? Isn't it true that you're going to use that money to give tax cuts to the 1%?
So there were some primary promises that were made during the Affordable Care Act. There were some primary promises that I think everybody probably remembers very well when the Affordable Care Act passed. The first promise was that if you liked your doctor, you could keep your doctor. If you liked your plan, you could keep your plan, and that it would lower the cost of insurance. What we saw in Colorado was 500,000 Coloradans had their health insurance plans canceled. What we saw in Colorado is this chart right here.
You know, I'm sure the people in the back cannot hear the answer. Please honor this lady by letting him answer her question.
What will make this country stronger is when we have the ability to listen to both sides who may disagree and to come up with solutions that can work for more people. So this information is from the Colorado Division of Insurance. And this chart shows that their projection at the Colorado Division of Insurance is that in 2018 there will be a 30%, nearly 30%, 27% rate increase of our insurance premiums. That's from the Department of Insurance. And so what I hope to do in this effort is, and I said this in 2014 when I ran for the Senate, that I would work to repeal the Affordable Care Act and replace it with something that actually works to decrease the quality of care and increase the quality of care and decrease the cost of care. That's what we have to do. And so what we will continue to do is work to make Medicaid sustainable, stabilize the individual marketplace, which right now isn't working. And if you look at Colorado, there are 14 counties right now that only have one choice of a provider to choose from. That's not choice. We can do better than that. The third thing that we have to do is make sure that people who have pre-existing conditions are able to have affordable coverage. And the fourth thing we need to do is to bring down that cost. And so that's what we've got to do.
All right, please. I'm going to call up the next people, please. Joan Poston, Aaron Egan, and Terry Heaton.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, sure.
So while you're asking your question, sir, would you 3 come up if I called your name?
Thanks. Yeah. Well, I think the continued question is, look, the idea was to create a tax credit structure that works to help people on lower incomes, to create a high-risk pool that works to help coverage with pre-existing conditions, to create a long-term stability fund that would actually work. We had a $45 billion opioid fund in there, so that's something that would work.
All right. All right. If we can be quiet, we'll go on to the next question. Thank you, sir. Over here, I think next question.
Hi. You brought up single-payer healthcare, and I was just wondering why. When we know about the feasibility of a program like that, because if we look around the world, you know, places like Norway, Denmark, Sweden, they all pay less per capita. They all pay less per capita for care. They get better care outcomes. They have more doctors per 1,000 patients than us. And the only really, the thing that I've heard about your healthcare record is that you voted to take it away from tens of millions of people. So how are you pursuing comprehensive reform for healthcare?
Yeah. Yeah. So again, what we've got to do is stabilize the individual marketplace. So if we make sure that we have a stable... Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
I'm trying to answer the healthcare
yeah, I guess
question.
we're going to have to... somebody doesn't want a town hall meeting, but once we get this dealt with, we can go on and he'll answer your question.
So what I think we should do is stabilize the individual marketplace. That affects about 8% of the marketplace. How do we do that? We do it by tearing down some of the regulatory burdens that are preventing people from offering insurance right now. We do it through tax credits, long-term stability fund, some of the efforts on high-risk pools to make sure that that insurance is affordable. And so... Look, I'm trying to answer the questions. You may disagree with the answers, but I'm trying to answer the questions. So if we could just have a chance to answer the questions, we'll have a great conversation. And again, what we have to do in this country is not shout each other down, but find ways that we can actually and work in a bipartisan way to have solutions to healthcare. So to further answer your question, when it comes to...
Can I just talk about high-risk pools for a second?
Sure.
Just, you brought up high-risk pools, and we know, I mean, honestly, those were really disastrous. At their height, by the end of 2011, they only covered a little over 200,000 people, right? But how many were eligible for it? About like 4 million, right? That's a massive failure. And on top of that, once the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act actually instituted a national one, it only covered 100,000 people. That's not enough. That's ridiculous.
That's why we can do it better.
They didn't work. They failed. We already tried it.
Yeah. It's about making sure that we have the funding we need in a pre-existing condition high-risk pool. It's about making sure that we tear down the regulations. Again, you may disagree with these ideas, but you're asking for them, and so I'm going to continue to try to do my best to talk about these solutions. Yeah. So look, what we also ought to do when it comes to insurance is allow insurance to be sold across state lines. We ought to allow insurance to be sold across state lines. We ought to allow association health plans to cover. For instance, if there is an independent car dealership in town, can that car dealer team up with the local construction dealer to buy insurance for their people? Because we know that one of the best ways to have insurance is to have a strong group plan, and that's one of the ideas that we've tried to develop through some of the plans we've come up with. Yeah.
All right, I think we have a question over here. Please, these people can't hear the answers to their questions, so give her respect.
I don't think the mic is on. Can we check it?
Yep.
Now is it on?
Yes.
Yep.
My name is Erin Egan, and I first want to thank you very, very sincerely for your statements over the weekend regarding white supremacy. I'm a physician, and I work in rural hospitals in Colorado. 20% of my patients are on Medicaid, 10% are self-pay, 30% are on private insurance. You talk about how there are physicians who don't take Medicaid. Some of us do. We take everyone who walks in the door. I see these people's faces. I have been to your office. I have given you a list of patients that I took care of over 30 days. Which ones were Medicaid? Which ones died? Which ones needed things? And which ones would not get care? You just told us you stand for some things like not cutting Medicaid and not cutting pre-existing conditions. We asked you to stand your ground and vote for those principles, and you did not. You say it's important to decrease costs, but you don't have any plan to do that. You only want to cut off people who need it. So when you talk about saying you believe in these things, you don't stand for them. And I want you to look me in the eye and tell me, when the time really comes again, that you will stand for those people, not those numbers, and not be a partisan over a patriot. You get to disagree with us, but you speak for us, which means if you disagree, you still speak for us. And I would like to know that you will do that.
I am going to fight to make sure...
Thank you.
I'm going to fight to make sure that we... Look, the Affordable Care Act, I've talked to people who've said that it will help them help their family. But I've talked to people that it did not help. And so what we've talked about is how do we make this system better? There are 145,000 people in Colorado who pay a tax to the federal government because they can't find affordable insurance. I think it's 59,000 of them earn under $25,000. And so what I'm saying to you is I am going to support efforts that will lead us to lower cost insurance that can address those 4 30,000-foot goals that I talked about, of making sure that Medicaid is sustainable, about making sure we restore stability in the individual market, that we can have affordable insurance for people with pre-existing condition. That's what I've been fighting for. That's what I'm going to continue to do. And now I know people disagree with it, but I've seen studies that show that the ideas we had could result in lower cost insurance. And so that's what we have to consider. There are ideas that some people support. There are ideas that some people oppose. I hope we can have a bipartisan solution to this. But again, we've got to continue to do it.
Great.
And with respect, sir, that is not what you voted for.
I'm sorry. I don't know what you said.
Can't hear it. Oh, let's go over here. Let's go over here, ma'am. Thank you. All right, let's let this lady ask a question, please.
Hello, Senator Gardner. I'm sure you know who I am and you recognize me. A year ago, I was at the Red State Gathering and I called you out. I called you out because you weren't supporting my president. You didn't believe that my president would win. He did. I am so excited that I got to follow that young lady because I have the example that you're looking for. A month ago, I had a friend of mine whose daughter had a baby that was born, and that baby had to spend 10 days in an ICU. And because of the 10 days that baby spent, they had to come up with $11,000 before that baby could come home. This is something that 3 of the families in that ICU had to face. The other 7 were on Medicaid because of the rate of Coloradans that are on Medicaid now has risen. This is unacceptable. This is not how things should have been and be. And this couple also has bills from their education that they are trying to pay off. When I voted for you, you said that you would repeal and replace. And right now, the Freedom Caucus is working very hard on a petition to repeal and replace.
One second. I can't hear. One second.
To repeal and replace. And I know that the majority of the people in this room are people who feel that they have the right to say that the ACA should continue. But I'm going to remind you of who put you in office. And I'm going to remind you of what we would like to have happen. So, Senator, please tell me, when will you repeal and replace?
Hey, before you answer that question, Senator, can we get the next 3 people to go ahead and come forward?
I'm going to continue to fight for something that works to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, something that lowers cost, increases the quality of care.
Mary Donahue, Kara Lohmeyer, Simone Aiken.
Say those names again. I don't know if they...
Simone Aiken, Kara Lohmeyer, Mary Donahue. So let's go over here first, ma'am.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, make sure you don't get the feedback though. Yes. Senator Gardner, I was another one of your constituents who is very happy to hear your remarks on Charlottesville. and I sincerely thank you for those remarks. Cogent language denouncing white supremacy is important, but it's the bare minimum. Charlottesville was not an isolated incident. Heather Heyer was not the only person to lose her life to bigotry in 2017. Timothy Kaufman, Rick Best, Taliesin Michi, and Richard Collins, an ROTC commissioned officer about to graduate from the University of Maryland, were all killed by known white supremacists this year. In their report last month, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation documented a 68% increase in crimes based on race or ethnicity from 2015 to 2016. Colorado has endured a doubling of anti-Semitic offenses, a doubling of offenses at college campuses, and a doubling of property damages. Mosques and synagogues throughout the state have repeatedly faced acts of vandalism and intimidation in 2017. Yet in January, the Department of Homeland Security suspended grants for the Countering Violent Extremism program, which works to deter these domestic terrorists, and proposed a 2018 budget which eliminates the CVE entirely. Again, I thank you for your strong words, condemning bigotry and terrorism, but I must ask you for your actions as well as your words. I've been disappointed in the contradiction between your actions, votes, and words in the past. Will you put my taxpayer money where your mouth is? Will you ensure that grants are awarded to combating white supremacist, neo-Nazi groups under the CVE? Can you ensure that they're unfrozen? And will you vote against any budget and use your position on the Budget Committee to ensure that the 2018 budget includes CVE funding? Funding that is not only directed towards Islamic terrorism, but groups such as neo-Nazis, the KKK, the Sovereign Citizens Movement, and the Three Percenters, and other white nationalist groups. Will you commit, and furthermore, will you commit to voting against any nominee that comes before the Senate who has stated anything less than a complete repudiation of these groups?
I think they have to repudiate those groups. They have to repudiate them. When it comes to CVE, they've got to reconsider that decision, absolutely reconsider that decision, because that's something I'm going to fight for, something that I'll fight and make sure that we have the resources necessary to address bigotry, hatred, and racism in this country, because what we've seen is unacceptable. Thank you. Now, sorry.
I'm happy to hear you say that, but you have votes that you can use in the Senate. You have a position on the Budget Committee.
That's right.
Can you commit to funding that?
Yeah, we'll have a bipartisan effort to do that. Thank you. Thank you. That's why I've committed to an investigation as well by the DOJ, and we have to make sure that that investigation of what I call domestic terrorism works. So thank you.
All right, so ma'am over here.
Yeah.
Hello, Senator Gardner.
I said that I was going to fight to make sure we have the resources to fight against KKK racism and hatred. I said that. There was a little bit of crowd noise that you probably didn't hear it over. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Ma'am, over here.
Hello, Senator Gardner.
Let's listen to her question.
My name is Mary Donahue, Denver 80220. I've spent quite a few Tuesday mornings outside your office waiting to your staff.
Very good.
Nice to see you in person. My concern is your continued support of Scott Pruitt and the actions that he's taking at the EPA. I don't understand how you can support a person who is daily eliminating, reducing, taking away, canceling regulations that protect the clean water and the clean air of not only Colorado, but of the whole country. And you say that you love the beautiful environment here in Colorado, but sir, Scott Pruitt is not protecting our water and air through any of his actions. I'm really concerned about that.
So I have 3 young children that I want to make sure have an incredible environment to enjoy in Colorado. We have an incredible outdoor legacy of national forests and national parks. And that's why I'm going to continue to do what's right by those children to make sure that it's available and better off for the next generation. But let me tell you about my visit last week to southwestern Colorado with the administrator of the EPA. When I was with the administrator of the EPA, Scott Pruitt, what he said in southwestern Colorado is that the EPA walked away from a spill that they caused, putting 3 million gallons of toxic substance, sludge, into the Animas River. You all remember that August 2015 picture. And the EPA walked away from it. A promise was made that locals who were injured and hurt would be reimbursed, and they were not. Some were, some weren't. The county had some money, but they weren't made whole. What Scott Pruitt said is he would make it whole. What he said is that he would make it a priority in the Superfund. And we've got to fight for that funding to make sure that we address these issues in southwestern Colorado, western Colorado overall, and the western part of the United States. And so that's what we've got to continue to do. And that's my conversation with Scott Pruitt. When he committed to making sure that he would make it right in Colorado, that's what we have to continue to do. And I do believe the EPA has overreached at times. I do believe they have. I do believe they have. Let me give you one example. The Waters of the United States regulation. I am grateful that we're repealing the Waters of the United States regulation. You know why? Because the EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers' own studies have shown that 2/3 of the waterways that they've identified as navigable are intermittent flow, meaning they don't have water in them year-round. That's going too far. I don't think we should put things in place that hurt our farmers, our ranchers, our economy, when the benefits don't outweigh the costs.
Great. Ma'am, just before we ask your question, would the next 3 are Dr. Denny Doral, John Gabriel, and Dana Blaylock. So if you'll make your way forward while she's asking her question, please.
So the lady before with the Charlottesville pieces about what the Republicans could do to stop making the Nazis
Can you speak up a little?
Them. So I had a question specifically about things the Republicans do that make the Nazis think you like them, such as cutting the funding to watch them, monitor, and keep them in check. But the lady back there pretty much covered it. So rather than repeat what hers, I want to expand on that a little. And so in Charlottesville, they were protesting the removal of a monument of Robert E. Lee. And the hilarious thing is that Robert E. Lee opposed building monuments to him. He actually has a quote that says, "I think it wiser not to keep open the sores of war, but to follow the example of those nations who endeavored to obliterate the marks of civil strife, to commit to oblivion the feelings engendered." So they're yelling heritage, not hate, for a statue of a man who opposed the building of that very statue, which is the irony. But Republicans very much champion the keeping of these monuments. And he opposed them many times. He has other quotes complaining about the cost, that the South had been ravaged, infrastructure had been destroyed, schools burned down, people orphaned. There were so many better things to spend that money on than statues. So I'm sitting here and I'm looking at this guy, this person I really disagree with and don't like much, and realizing he had a better sense of civic responsibility to his people than the Republican Party seems to right now. Can we... Why can the Republican Party say that these monuments need to come down and that we need to put health care first and not worry so much about whose name is on the bill, just that it does good stuff? If you can work with the Democrats to make it better, humble yourself and do that.
I look forward to doing that. I hope what you're saying, though, and I hope that you don't believe that Republicans are racist overall. That's a shame. That's a shame.
It's not, Republicans are not all racist. They absolutely are not. But almost all racists are Republicans. That's really embarrassing to stand next to.
There are people who are going to agree with you and disagree with you. And I hope that we in this country don't believe with a broad cast that they are all racists. I hope that that is not what I'm hearing from you, that you don't honestly believe that all Republicans are racist. Because that is a dangerous thing in this country when one political party believes that the other political party are nothing but a bunch of racists. And I hope we can come together as a nation.
Great. Let's go on to the next question, ma'am, behind. Next question.
Well, I'm sorry. Yeah, look, let me just, I didn't. You're right. Here. Look, we have to have conversations with those things that enable hate, with communities that are affected by it. And we have to make it right with those communities. And the other thing that we've got to do is this. There was a governor who said it's hard to hate up close. And I've said this at both town halls today. It's hard to hate up close. And we have to make sure that we don't just listen to those voices all the time that agree with us. Because if we simply listen to the voices that agree with us all the time, then we're not getting that up-close engagement with the communities to bring and just tear down that hate. So we've got to do that. So we've got to engage with these people who, for whatever reason, whatever issue it is, to make sure that we don't have that hate in our hearts. And the other thing I would say is this. In Colorado, we've been witness to some of this. If you go back to World War II, Ralph Carr. How many of you know who Ralph Carr is? Marion Kanishi, and I would encourage you to look it up. You can find it on the internet. Marion Kanishi was an 18-year-old, I think she was 18 years old. She was the valedictorian at Camp Amachi, a Japanese-American internment camp in Grenada, Colorado, in southeastern Colorado. 70-plus years ago, she wrote an incredible valedictorian speech from her internment camp, where she was taken by Americans as an American and put there. In her speech, in her statement, she said, "This country has made mistakes. This country has made great mistakes. This country has acknowledged them, and we have made ourselves better from them. What we have to do is to make sure that we acknowledge our mistakes and that we work together, not as Democrats or Republicans, but as people of this country, to make sure that we acknowledge and overcome and never repeat those great mistakes that Marion Kanishi so eloquently talked about in her speech."
Great. Ma'am, over here. Yeah, thank you. Let her ask her question, please.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank you very much for coming. You don't know what a great honor it is to be here. This is the first town meeting I have ever attended in my life.
Very good. Welcome.
Might be the last.
And I actually walked a couple miles to get here. That's because I was afraid I wanted to be here so much. But my question is, I myself am a doctor too, and when Trump came out with the very first, I guess you would call it, changes to Obamacare, it was 142 pages. I read that. I emailed you several times. I've left messages with you. I even called Paul Rand, Lee Johnson. I called everybody, including Perlmutter, because I was trying to get everybody on board with it. And I guess my question is, did you read it? Because it guaranteed $15 billion to Medicaid. Also, it was a great bill because it was going to keep in place everything that we needed to protect Medicare and Medicaid. And again, I called even Ted Cruz down in Texas. My question is why didn't the Republicans get on board with this? I mean, because it was the best compromise I have seen since Obamacare came out. And the second part is I worry because I don't think people have read the Obamacare, which was 200 and some pages, and at the very tail end, I don't even know if people are aware of it, but they're getting money from your taxes, and the people that are going to be hurt, they are taking money. Monies in 2017 in your taxes are going to go up if you have capital gains. This is for an average retired person, and I work with a lot of senior population who are living off of dividends. Their tax rate is going to go almost to 40%. So here they are having to pay supplement as a senior citizen, and their taxes are going up. With that compromise that Trump came out with, it would have kept the taxes low for those people, and it would have kept Medicare and Medicaid in place. Can I just ask what happened?
Yeah, thanks, Doctor, for the question. And was this the plan that he released during the campaign? Is that the plan?
No, it came out he released it in February.
Okay.
It was available to read in March.
Right, yes.
And after that, I was like I said, I was calling, campaigning. I sent it to people I know across the country. I'm calling other states. I called you. I called Perlmutter. I couldn't get any. The only person that actually responded to me was Ted Cruz in Texas.
Yeah, and I am familiar with that bill. I read that bill. It was not the bill that ended up being introduced. Obviously, that was a part of a different direction that we tried to do to lower the rates of health insurance to stabilize the individual market. I'll go back and look at it again and see if there is a way that that can be the basis of a bipartisan bill.
It was good. It helped everybody. It was across the board. It kept everything in place, guaranteed the monies to the states, but the changes were that allowed the states to spend the Medicaid the way they saw fit.
Yeah, and so that's one of the ideas that emerged in the healthcare bills that we voted on, was to allow the states greater control over their Medicaid dollars. In fact, it would give the states control, eliminating the waivers that they, giving them the waivers that they want instead of making them wait for months, if not years, and then denying those waivers and making the state go through the expense. Because if the state believes they can come up with a better way to run the program, then the state should have the ability to better run the program. And that's what we should be for. There are other ideas out there. Senator Bill Cassidy, Senator Lindsey Graham has an idea out there that would take all of the funding and block grant it to the states, let the states run the entire program. And again, it would allow Colorado or Utah or California to run the program the way they see fit. And in fact, for Colorado, at least according to Senator Cassidy's speech that he gave on the Senate floor, it would result in about a 40+% increase in funding for Colorado.
Who do I get on board with to help push this?
Yeah.
This agenda?
What was that?
Who do I get on board with to keep that bill that first came out? Who do I try to get
I think
out
continuing
there?
to contact us about it, to share your expertise with it. Are you a medical doctor, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, so continuing to reach out to us to help us understand the issues, because, and then other members of the Colorado delegation work with the state, the HCPF, to talk to them to see if it would work. We've had many conversations with them to try to make sure we understand all of the elements of the proposals, and so the best thing we can do is provide education and information on these proposals.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking time for me. And
Thank you.
for
Thanks for being here. Thank you.
And Suzanne Krebs, Blanca Sejo or Trejo, and Robin Philipzak. You're next. If you'd like to be.
Maybe say
Any of you here? All right, we'll try 3 more.
All right, very good. Come on down.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much for coming today. I came to hear the senator's response to my question, so please refrain from speaking while he's speaking. I cried on Tuesday morning. I was fearful after hearing the president's rhetoric towards North Korea. I'm concerned that Trump has the ability to launch first strike. What can you do to ensure that this is not a unilateral decision by Trump?
Well, the most important thing that we can do is to make sure that we have peaceful denuclearization of North Korea. That's the most important thing that we can do. And so there may be others who have a different rationale. I don't think we can live with a madman in Pyongyang who has a nuclear arsenal willing to use it against us. And so what we have to do is to make sure that we have sanctions and pressure and diplomatic efforts and economic efforts in place to bring him to the negotiating table to agree to the preconditions that they have already agreed to in North Korea, which would be to disassemble and to eliminate their nuclear program. That will avoid war, and that will get us to the point where we have a peaceful resolution to North Korea.
Will you wait a minute? I want to speak, and I'm going to wait until they're quiet.
Please, let's be quiet for a minute. She wants to ask a follow-up.
That does not comfort me. I'm afraid. I'm afraid that he will take unilateral, I'm afraid that he will take unilateral steps, and he has advisors that I believe are speaking more logically. It will be a comfort to me to know that he cannot act unilaterally. And again, I know that a bill was presented in January or February. I'm not sure who it was. I think it was both a congressperson and a senator to enact and change the protocol so he would not have unilateral first strike capability. And I feel like what can you do to make him, what can you do to prevent that from happening?
The answer may not be, people may not agree with this answer, but what I have said is we have to prevent conflict. We have to avoid that. We can't let that happen. And that's why we make sure that we peacefully denuclearize North Korea, and that we make sure that we don't go in that direction, because we cannot have North Korea with a nuclear weapon that's ready. So I understand what you want me to say, which is that you want me to agree that we won't let the commander-in-chief be the commander-in-chief. And that's unconstitutional. That's unconstitutional. That's a violation of our Constitution.
All right. All right.
And so that, I will not, that's a violation of the Constitution, so I can't agree to a violation of the Constitution.
All right, so next questions. Lynn Fisher, Nancy, looks like sister, Curtis Hessel. Are any of you three? There's maybe Curtis.
Who's going next?
Nancy. Thanks.
Over here? Oh, okay.
Oh, we'll start over here. Okay, thanks.
Senator Gardner, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I have a question that hasn't been touched on tonight yet. The Texas Attorney General and several other state attorney generals recently wrote a letter to the administration saying that they would sue if DACA, the program that protects the young Americans that were brought, or the young individuals that were brought here, they would sue the administration if DACA is not ended by September 5th. There's been several bills that have been introduced to Congress, bipartisan and Republican, the RAC Act and the DREAM Act. And these bills would protect these young individuals from deportation. And I'm wondering if you will protect these dreamers and if you will support a legislative solution to grant these young individuals that are studying here, that are working hard, a path to permanent status.
I know. Thanks for the question. Yeah. I look forward to talking to Senator Graham about his legislation. I think ultimately the solution on immigration reform in this country means that children, young people who are brought here, not of their own volition, not of their own will, they're very young, that they will be ultimately a part of this country and allowed as Americans to be in this country. And so I think that's part of the solution on immigration reform. But I think we have to have more than just that part of immigration reform. We have to go broader. We have to fix the entry-exit system in our country. We have about 12 million people in this country who are here without documentation. About 42% of them came legally on a valid visa but overstayed their visa. And so we have to fix the immigration system so that people who want to be a part of this country, most of us came here from somewhere else. And we have to make sure that we have always that recognition that this is a great place for all of us to be, and we want people to come and continue to make this nation vibrant. We need border security. Yes, we do. That should be a part of a solution. And so there are a lot of things that we can do together, and I hope we can get to all of them in a bipartisan. I think there's a bipartisan solution possible. And I look forward to talking to Senator Graham about it. Yeah.
Both bipartisan and Republican, like the DREAM Act or the RAC Act,
Yeah.
and there is now an imminent threat with this Attorney General letter. And will you support
I
legislation?
look forward to talking to Senator Graham, learning more about how I haven't read the legislation this year. I know it's been reintroduced, and I look forward to getting into it and asking questions to Senator Graham, because I do think this is part of the solution.
All right, thank you. All right, let's go over to this side.
Sir, I want to thank you for being here today, and I also want to thank your staff who've taken my call ever since the day that Donald Trump was inaugurated, and they give me hope that the center may hold. The green economy already supports more jobs than the fossil fuel economy and has for years, even though renewable energy accounts for only 12% of our domestically produced energy. What do you plan to do to support a green economy, a green energy plan that employs Americans and mitigates the impact of fossil fuels on our changing climate?
Yeah, thanks. We had growing up on the Eastern Plains, I thought that damn wind was one word. We have a lot of wind. And thanks to that wind, we have some incredible opportunities with wind power. And you go out to the Eastern Plains from Lamar to Sterling, and you can see the wind turbines that are generating clean electricity. I've supported the extension of the production tax credit. I fought for that ever since I've been in Congress. I've supported the extension of the ITC on solar power. Look, I mean, if you're a farmer, for instance, in Lincoln County, Colorado, there's a wheat farmer out there. And if you're a wheat farmer, you're probably not doing very well right now because the prices are pretty low. But you know what he does have? He has a number of wind turbines that are paying him $5,000 a year on his farm. And it's those wind turbines, that renewable energy, that is allowing him to continue his farming operation. And that's an incredible thing. So it helps our economy. And so I'm a strong supporter of renewable energy. I'm going to fight against efforts to cut the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. I sent a letter to the Secretary of Energy, and my staff can get you a copy of the letter if you'd like to see it, that said this grid review that you're doing, that you're going to come out with, you need to include experts on renewable energy like those at National Renewable Energy Laboratory as part of that study so that we can make sure that their voice is heard. I created a bipartisan renewable energy efficiency caucus in the House of Representatives and the Senate. I've led on legislation known as performance contracting. It's kind of a wonky thing, but what it would do is it would save $20 billion of taxpayer money, and it would help make our government buildings more energy efficient by utilizing renewable energy, and it would do it without costing the taxpayer a dime, and it would create thousands of private sector jobs, all with renewable energy. So I'm a strong supporter of renewable energy, and I'm probably, when I was in the state legislature in Colorado, I'm probably the only Republican who ever had a renewable energy bill vetoed by a Republican governor. So we got to continue to support those efforts. And I also, for full disclosure, believe in traditional energy as well. And I believe that we have a all-of-the-above mix that we've got to support in this country. There was a story recently about around a 250,000 jobs in Colorado that are because of oil and gas. And if you look at the benefits that those jobs pay in cities like mine that only have 3,000 people, that's an important part of our future too. So we can't abandon it, because if we do the wrong policies, we're going to drive up the cost of energy. Right now we're seeing lower cost energy. But if we do the wrong thing, we're going to end up with higher cost energy, and the people who can least afford it are poor, fixed incomes, and seniors, and I don't support those kind of economic harm policies when it comes to our energy policy.
Great. Let's go ahead and stay over on this side. Next question.
Oh, okay. I grew up in New York. I'm the same age as Donald Trump. I was very well aware of all the horrific things that he did throughout his career. And when he ran for president, I couldn't believe that anybody in their sane mind would vote for him. But unfortunately, 35% of this country seems to hold fast that they are going to agree with anything that he says. He has systematically voted or enacted proposals that have destroyed the values of this country. I was always proud to say that I was an American, and I cannot say that now, and I cannot put those two words together, President and Trump, because he is not what should represent this country. From what he's pulling out of the Paris Accords, from how he does not want to help refugees, the health care plan, which he doesn't even care what's in it. He didn't even read it. And how can you elect a man that can only look at the Daily Brief in cartoon characters because he's incapable of his attention span being more than 5 minutes? There was a group of psychiatrists who, before he was elected, said that this man is not competent and he should not be president of the United States. And yet you're talking about the commander-in-chief who, with these tweets, that's the way he issues his policy, are on the verge of lunacy, and he should not have the control to press that button. And it's very evident with just his tweets today, with the 4 people who resigned from his commission because they didn't agree with his non-statement on the neo-Nazis and the alt-right who was standing out there holding an American flag today. I never thought that I would see in my country the Nazi swastika in public and not have a massive condemnation from every single member in the government. I'd like to know when there is going to be a joining of both parties to try and remedy this appalling situation, work together as you once did, and not have somebody like Steve Bannon say, Steve Miller say, that the inscription on the Statue of Liberty doesn't really mean anything because it was written after we got this. We are supposed to care for people, and I want to know why you're not caring for people.
Well, look, I think how many people saw that we passed a bipartisan Veterans Care Bill last week? I'm glad a lot of you did. We passed over the last Congress, for the first time in 19 years, a bipartisan highway funding bill, long-term funding bill. We passed an overhaul of education reform. There's a lot of things that we've been able to do bipartisan that didn't make it into the news because they weren't controversial, because people on both sides of the aisle agreed to it. I will continue to stand up to people who I believe are wrong. I'll continue to say that. I'll continue to act on that. But what we have to do is realize there are people who supported President Trump. There are people who voted for President Trump, and they are a part of our country as well. They are a part of our country as well, and they deserve to be respected by all of us, just like we all deserve to be respected. Everybody here. People, now that's just not, I don't support white supremacists, and you know that. So what we have to do is make sure that we recognize and respect the voices, the KKK, the neo-Nazis, and the white supremacists. Like I said earlier, go back to your cave.
Great, thank you. Just a quick time check. You know, we said we'd be out of here at 5 o'clock. I think we've got about a little more than 15 minutes left. So let's kind of quickly, so we can get as many people through as possible. Ma'am, go ahead.
Okay, my question's on the Affordable Care Act. You voted for a bill that your fellow senators called, quote, a terrible policy, and your own governor said it would hurt Coloradans, but you went ahead and voted for it anyway. Trump and your fellow Republicans have vowed to let Obamacare die, but it's what we have right now. And if you really care about your fellow Coloradans, I want to know what you will do to make sure that the Affordable Care Act funding is not cut off. There was a CBO score that came out just this afternoon saying that if the funding was cut off to the Affordable Care Act, that the most popular plan would, the premiums would raise by at least 20%. You also talked about how some places in Colorado only have one choice. One way to get rid of that problem, which is a problem in the Affordable Care Act, and that's because insurance companies have pulled out, it would be to have a government option. A government option would allow every place to have at least one option, plus the insurance companies. Also, you've talked about the free market in healthcare. Healthcare cannot be a free market. You cannot opt out of being sick. You can say, I'm not going to drive a car, so I don't need car insurance. You cannot say, I am not going to be sick, so I don't need health insurance. Every single person needs to have health insurance in order to make it work. The well people.
So
what will you do to make sure that the Affordable Care Act
keeps being funded so we have something.
What happened, what you're talking about is the money that would be paid to the insurance companies under the Affordable Care Act. That's what you're talking about, correct? And the courts have said that that was not authorized by Congress. So the payments that took place in the past were not authorized by Congress, a violation of the law. What we have said is we've got to make sure that we bring stability to the marketplace, because if you just continue to throw dollar after dollar after dollar to the insurance companies, all you're doing is paying the insurance companies more money to do the same doggone thing. And so what we need are reforms that will stabilize the marketplace like I talked about. I know some people may disagree with insurance across the state line. There may be some people who disagree with association health plans. There may be some people who support the idea of association and getting more people into better paying jobs with group benefits through their employer. But those are things we can do to help lower the cost of insurance. But through these payments, though, we should expect some kind of reforms. We can't just continue to pay the insurance companies for the status quo because it's not working.
All right. Before you ask your next question, I'll give 3 more names. And also, someone wanted to ask a question. They wrote it on the card, Laura Penland. And then let me read these 3 names first, so if you'll come up to the microphone. Kendra Quinn, David Vranian, and Cynthia, Svasti, I think. The question, Senator Gardner, from Laura Penland is, why Obamacare subsidies for Congress? Can you speak to health care for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2011, when I was elected to the House of Representatives, I opted out of the congressional health care plan, and we kept our Rocky Mountain health plans here in Colorado. In August of 2013, we received a letter, along with over 200,000 other Coloradans, that said that that plan had been canceled because of the Affordable Care Act. Members of Congress should be in the same system and exchange as everybody else. I firmly believe that. And I'll continue to support efforts to do just that.
So your question, sir.
Yeah, I'll try and keep things brief. So first, a little gentle chiding, I suppose, which is, like many people here, I assume I was on the phone many times this past summer, in part because I genuinely believed at the beginning of the summer when you indicated that you were apprehensive about a Medicaid rollback that you meant it. And every time I called, I would consistently get the excuse that the bill wasn't finished yet, keep waiting for the bill, the senator's waiting for the bill to be written. And when the next day they were going to be voting on a bill, all of a sudden it no longer rang true. And I was incredibly disappointed, in fact, the night that I watched my senator vote for a bill that the Republicans had written over lunch and that no one had read. So this is what I would like. A very, very concrete commitment that you would vote against any piece of legislation that had not been out for public scrutiny for at least 3 weeks.
I will read legislation, and I will make sure I do everything I can to do what's right for Colorado. And you may disagree or agree with that, but I will make sure that I read the legislation. There is legislation that sometimes moves faster than 3 weeks, and it has to, because of there's emergency. So we've got to find a solution. That's why I asked for more time, and I think everybody here is aware that I asked for more time for the health care bill, that I asked for bipartisan opportunities for it to come, and I hope we have bipartisan opportunities with the health care bill that we can put in place.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seems to me that there may be some bills that need a very quick time frame. This one, big as it is, as many lives at stake, as much of the economy that we profess to value is at stake, it needs public scrutiny. You cannot do it in secret.
Continue to it. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you. We'll go over here next. Ma'am, you've waited a long time. Go ahead and ask your question, please.
My name is Kendra Quinn, and I want to thank you for being here. Appreciate you being here. My question is
you said earlier that you did 100, you've done 100 town halls, but it's been a very long time since you've done one. It was 480 days, I believe. Whatever the number was. And I understand, you know, it's really been frustrating for me as a constituent not to be able to voice my concerns and questions, to come and meet you face to face like I did today. So I really appreciate you doing this. I really want to ask you, yeah, we all do. Thank you very much. What are we going to do to make sure that we have more town halls? What can we do? What can you do? We need more town halls with you, please.
So, do you have another question? Did you want to ask me a question about something other than a town hall?
No, I want to ask you. How can you reassure us that there are going to be more of these? This is not going to be the last one.
All right. So look, we will continue what I call an approach that tries to recognize there are people who can't get to these town halls. So we do teletown halls. So we'll do town halls where it's appropriate. We did a town hall in southwestern Colorado last week. We'll continue to do everything we can.
Please.
And so what I believe we have to do is try to find ways to reach out to as many people across Colorado as we can. That includes town halls. That includes trying to find ways to have constructive conversations with people. That includes individual meetings. That includes going and doing roundtable meetings and economic development roundtables in businesses. And so we will continue to do that, including town halls around the state of Colorado. We'll continue to do that.
Thanks. Okay. Thanks. Before the next question, Lavon Welkel and Lori Viano. So if you'd make your way to the microphone and go ahead, ma'am, please ask your question.
Okay. So today I'm here because I have to ask you, when are we going to know your stand on the DREAM Act? When are you going to be done reviewing the bill?
Yeah. Well, I look forward to talking to people who support it, asking questions to Senator Graham about what the new legislation does, and ultimately believe that the premise behind the DREAM Act is what has to be a part of a solution for long-term immigration reform. So I look forward to talking to Senator Graham. I've got to ask the questions. I don't know when I'll get to answer those questions, so I look forward to having those conversations. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have a question over here.
Good afternoon, Senator, and thank you on behalf of everyone here. Thank you for meeting with us in person. We really appreciate it. My question is, it really comes from, I'm asking this as a mother, as a grandmother, as a human on this planet that would like to leave this planet better off than how I inherited it. And I have to say, I feel like I inherited a wonder, a beautiful, beautiful planet. My concern is that with Trump now pulling the United States out of the Paris Agreement, and really I feel like the United States should be a leader in climate change. Are you willing to press him to show that the United States should be a leader in saving our planet, as well as helping our economy be #1 in alternative energy and not pulling us out of that?
So, yeah, and so that's why, whether it was the confirmation hearing of Rick Perry for Department of Energy, I talked about renewable energy and my opposition to cuts to renewable energy, because I wanted to make it clear to Secretary Perry that I support the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. I support efforts to lead in renewable energy and innovation and clean energy. It's good for the economy, it's good for the environment, and it creates a tremendous number of jobs. We should be #1. I've said the same thing to Ryan Zinke and others who are involved in clean energy sources and issues that matter when it comes to development of clean energy. And so, yes, I'm going to continue to fight for clean energy, a cleaner environment, and I believe we have to do something very careful, though. We can't destroy our economy with an overreach as we pursue either regulations or as we pursue new types of approaches. So we really have to be careful on the regulatory overreach. And we have repealed $87 billion worth of regulations over the last 8 months, and I think that's good for our economy. So, thank you.
Yeah. All right, I think we got time for one last question, and you're it, ma'am.
Okay. Hi, I'm Lori Viano. Thank you very much for coming today. I really appreciate it. My question is about North Korea. I understand that there is bipartisan legislation on the floor at the moment that has been introduced. It's called Restricting First Use of Nuclear Weapons Act. Earlier today, you talked about that it's unconstitutional to restrict the power of the president to unilaterally do a first strike.
No, I said I'm not going to let the. I think the question was, people don't want the commander-in-chief to be commander-in-chief, and they said yes, that's unconstitutional.
Okay, I don't agree that we should restrict him from being commander-in-chief, but what I need to understand is what is your position on restricting his ability to do a first strike with nuclear weapons to anywhere without a declaration of war being approved by Congress.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for that. And the declaration of war, authorizations for use of military force, those are very incredible and important issues that we have to continue to pursue. So that's something that we must continue to work. We just had a hearing on the authorization for use of military force in the Middle East, a bipartisan hearing. Those are the things that we continue to do. I will not weaken the commander-in-chief of this country's ability to protect and defend this nation. I'm sorry, I will not. Thanks so much, everybody, for the opportunity to be with you today. I enjoyed our discussion, and we'll continue to have some talks with you. Thanks.
All right, thanks. Thank you. Want to thank everybody for coming.